Hey, White Sox fans, Brett Ballantini here. Lucky enough, well, I say lucky, that's in quotes, lucky enough to host Side Sox Mothership Podcast number 113 of these. Not all this year. Thank God for that. Hey, we are here in the middle of White Sox Fandom 2022. And boy, it's been something we've been struggling with, suffering from all season long. And no point in the season has probably been lower, uglier, and more painful than this past weekend where the White Sox took a series they reasonably should have won, let's say 2 out of 3, and decided to sweep and not even be competitive in 2 of those games. And we could talk a lot about the details of those games, but that's not going to be a lot of fun. I'm sure we will refer to this past series and this depressing season. But we're going to do a little different podcast like we try to do, because it's just not fun to keep talking about this team week after week after week. Nothing changes. We can't even make a change. They're not listening. So we're going to do something a little bit different with this podcast and probably just sprinkle in details of the misery of the past week as we go along. Before I launch into introducing that, let me introduce the guests we have on the podcast. Again, once again, always, when that signal goes up, Indianapolis responds. It is the field office of Chrystal O'Keefe and Joseph Resis. Chrystal, welcome. I'm glad to have you with me once again. Quick gut check. How you feeling?
Not great.
Perfect. You're the perfect guest for this podcast. Hey, Joe Resis, how are you feeling?
Well, at least they're making it easy to quit, I suppose. There's silver lining in it. I mean, if they would have taken 2 out of 3 from Arizona, I would still kind of be on the fence about the team, but that is no longer the case. So, I mean, at least I kind of know where to stand now.
Pulled you right back in, and they didn't do it this time. Thank you, White Sox. Thank you. Allows us to have a different sort of podcast. Now, I don't know what's wrong with me. I have problems, some audio visual type auditory issues. I don't know why I could not pronounce Jordan Hass's name properly, but she is here with us once again. Perhaps with guest cat. Oh yeah, I'm on now. I'm
got it now.
You know, listen, I've called Chrystal Cheryl, Joe. I probably screwed something up. I don't know what it is, but didn't call him Sox Math Champion or something. So yeah, listen, I'm on the train now, Jordan. No sweat at all. But okay, quick gut check. You're getting a lot of very interpersonal interaction with this team, given that you're now writing on a very frequent basis for us. So quickly, how you feeling?
I have an entire article that says how I'm feeling. So
that's true.
But not any better than when I wrote that.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, nothing's gotten any better. What I want to do with this podcast, at least the bulk of it, is address Sox fandom, not White Sox Twitter, not the people who still defend Tony La Russa, not the people who still think the White Sox have a chance, or the people who think there's absolutely no possibility the White Sox do anything this year. Hey, there's a month left, whatever, who knows? Crappy division. But something that's been creeping up on all of us, whether you're fairly new to the White Sox fandom, or maybe, you're listen, my life stretches longer than all of yours, and my White Sox fandom stretches longer than, probably at least a couple of you. And, it speaks to the nature of our fandom, what attracts us to the team in the first place. Often, of course, is passed down from, say, a parent. Father is often the case, but could be a brother, could be a friend. You might just be contrary and decide to like the White Sox in what seems to be a Chicago Cubs world, which, by the way, hasn't always been close to that. But more importantly, how this team particularly, just in the course of 2 years under Tony La Russa, because last year there were a lot of traditional White Sox characteristics of competitive White Sox teams that were present, maybe in spite of Tony La Russa, but they were present. This year, we see a team that's actually being instructed maybe not to hustle. We're seeing a team that isn't hustling, doesn't seem to be caring. And this isn't just us as fans saying, wow, they lost, so they must not care. I hate them. I'm never watching the White Sox again, which we all tend to do as fans. We're fans. But it seems to be now much more part of the culture. You could point to Rick Hahn not putting together a team that gave the established holdovers in the core of this team a chance to win, hiring Tony La Russa in the first place, going all the way up to, of course, ownership. And now the recent prayers that Jerry Reinsdorf is going to sell the team, which, I got news for you. And there's an article sitting right alongside this podcast is going to tell you very clearly that is not going to happen. at least until he is no longer with us. So forget that. But there just seems to be a culture change with this team, even in the course of just a matter of months. It's been building perhaps, and it, frankly, to me as a fan, it offends the aesthetic I have as a White Sox fan. What attracts me to the team, what keeps me with them. I'm not a lifer. It's no guarantee I'm going to be a White Sox for life. Some of you, maybe all of you, weren't even born when the White Sox held out the state of Illinois for a new stadium. And at that time, I was 18 or something. I don't know. I was a fan, and I was a free thinking fan. And I said, hell with you. You go to Florida. I don't care. I don't know where I would have gone. Milwaukee. I was about to go to school in Texas. God help me. I'm like a Texas fan. I probably just wouldn't have been as much of a baseball fan. I certainly wouldn't have been a strong Sox fan. And I can't speak for the rest of them. I guess we're all different fans, and maybe you are lifers that say, listen, I'm with the Sox forever. But I think this podcast wants to address a little bit of if the team has gotten away from what attracted you to the White Sox in the first place. I'm interested to know how they might have done that. It's clear to me in ways it's happened, and I can, of course, as I always do, chime in. Everybody loves to have podcasts with me, but just, whoever wants to throw something out, is there something different about this year that really speaks not just to, the team's doing lousy and they're not going to make the playoffs and I'm disappointed, but hey, wait, is this what my fandom's about?
I'll start this off. I think you said it best in Slack the other day. When you cover your team that you root for and you're forced to even see it with a bit more of a critical eye than just your everyday kind of fan going to the game, hanging out with their friends. Like, you're forced to watch this team constantly underproduce, constantly fail. And it takes a lot out of you. Like today, I didn't have to watch the game. I didn't have coverage. I watched my son in 90-degree heat play a doubleheader instead. And even though they lost both games, it was still more enjoyable than watching the White Sox play today. And I now just take advantage of these recharge days where I don't have any coverage, because I'm sick of watching it. I'm sick of the excuses. I'm sick of, we've had so many injuries, or just any excuse. I don't care. I'm pro no one at this point. Yeah. And when you see it on players' faces too, last night they panned into Jose Abreu's face, and it hurt me as a fan, someone who, has this beautiful Jose Abreu right here. It hurt me as a fan to see how bummed out he is, and how the rest, and how Eloy's not smiling anymore. It's just this huge bummer that I'm just come on, October, I need a vacation from this team before I can cover them again next season.
Yeah, really. Talk about recharge. Well, on behalf of myself and the site, Chrystal, so sorry. You've been a hero this year, the end is in sight. that light in the distance, it is a train coming, but it is still coming. That sweet, sweet death will come soon enough. And
running towards that train.
Yeah, it is rough. Joe, Jordan, thoughts really about, even how you came to the White Sox as a fan, or, what characteristic do you associate with the team in your fandom, and, or, just how this team might be throwing that for a little bit of a loop.
Yes. I actually came to the White Sox fandom, and because of Ken the Hawk Harrelson back in the day. I'm from a family actually of mostly Cubs fans. Before I came along, my father was kind of a lifelong, blasphemous fan who cheered for both of the Chicago teams. So Ken Harrelson now he's only a White Sox fan. I really enjoyed just the enthusiasm that he had, especially with the home run calls. It was entertaining for me every time, especially as a little kid. The grinder rule commercials I will always kind of associate with the White Sox, especially with how iconic that year was in White Sox history. That was that insane World Series year was I was very, very lucky. That was my third year as a White Sox fan. Before then I wasn't really of a baseball watching age really. So that was extremely lucky. It's just this year obviously very different vibes. Not really following a lot of the grinder rules. In terms of just this is now my 20th year of being a fan, and maybe 2007 was more disappointing, maybe because they were coming off obviously of the recent World Series at that point and a 90 win season the previous year, where had there been a second wild card team, that would have been enough to make the playoffs. In 2007 they went 72 and 90, so they weren't even close to how good I thought they'd be. Maybe that year was more disappointing than this, but I'm not even sure if it is. I feel like with the timeline of their rebuilds, like 2022 should have been essentially the height of it. It's year 3. They were kind of set up for the early 2020s to be their time. Like this is go time, so to speak. And it's even when, a lot of the times when they win, it's just like it's kind of 3-2, 4-3, like bullpen grinds it out. They kind of singled home their only few runs. It's like not a lot of highlights to look back on and being like, oh yes, that was a great win there. Really can hang our hat on that one and look back at it on the highlight reel at the end of the season. Slightly below 500, even when they win, like it hasn't really been that exciting. So it has been a lot to take in from that perspective, but it's unfortunate, and I hope that they are able to make some changes, but I won't hold my breath.
And listen, it's popular for Cub fans to chide White Sox fans about, oh, you care so much about the team. And we've seen since the White Sox have taken off a little bit, that of course we know none of that's true. And the fan shame and all this stuff, everything goes around and comes around. We're all just baseball fans. We're the smarter ones. That's very clear. But there's no harm in defining yourself as a Chicago baseball fan relative to the Cubs. This is a 2-team town. There's not many of them. So of course, part of what defines you as a fan is what the other team isn't. This is why I'm White Sox fan, not a Cubs fan. Some of what I see, and some of what you said, Joe, sort of triggered this in me. Some of what you're seeing this year, it gets into a little bit of that. I hate to say like the lovable loser thing, because it's not quite that, but there's this sort of like the not really caring, ownership not really seemingly caring. It doesn't matter. They're gonna play the games anyway. Fans will come. They want to drink some beer. That's definitely something I define myself as a fan of not being. Of course, things have gotten very complicated with Cubs ownership, Cub fandom over the past decade or so. And again, that's a podcast or a podcast series unto itself, which Chrystal could speak very intelligently to. And who knows, we might have that series in the offseason. What the hell else are we going to talk about? But part of what fandom is here, and I guess just even referring to your father, Joe, is it often is, in most cases, he's obviously one of the unique others, but you do sometimes define yourself of what you aren't as much as what you are. And in a 2-team town, that's very easy to do. Who cares about Milwaukee? Who cares about St. Louis? This is a team right across town. All right, Jordan, getting to you now. Again, same question, just sort of what you see this year and how it matches up against how you feel as a fan, how you came to the White Sox as a fan, and whether it matches up or not.
One of my earliest memories is getting woken up to like watch them win the World Series when I was like 6 years old. So it's like nothing has hit that high, I guess. The Field of Dreams game was great, but it feels like it's been all downhill since then. But I think the one thing that even in the like terrible early 2000s, not early 2000s, early like 2010s teams, like where we had Adam Dunn and all that, it was like we were at least hitting home runs. It was fun because we could be losing like 8-5, but we hit like 3 or 4 home runs. It was like, I mean, I was reading somewhere that there was a year where we led the league in home runs, but like were like 29th in runs scored. But that's still fun. People like watching home runs. There's fun things about a home run. And it's like I'm a sucker for good pitching, which we've kind of had, but it's like no one but Cueto and like Cease today go past the 7th inning because for whatever reason no one can throw a strike. Even Cease can't throw a strike. And it's just like everything I find fun in baseball isn't happening. It's like you come to a game to like, oh, there's gonna be a home run or two, or there's gonna be some good strikeout stuff from the pitchers, and none of that's happened this year. Like Luis Roberts leading the team in home runs with like 16. I've said this like I think 4 or 5 times. I think I've said it on every single podcast. No one's gonna hit 20 home runs this year with the White Sox. It's statistically, it's like we'd have to go on some insane like 25 game winning streak to where even the slightest bit of hope would be returned. And even then, I'm just like, I'm at the point where it's like, I was like, if we won today, there's still, that little tiny sliver of hope or whatever. But even then, I'm like, I don't feel hopeful. But now it's like, okay, that hope is gone. Any game we win now feels meaningless. Almost at this point. It's like we've lost enough, and we've lost terribly enough into enough bad teams that any game we win doesn't matter. I'd rather just keep losing, at least losing in fun fashion, at least maybe. I mean, I'd rather lose a game where we hit like 3 or 4 home runs than win a game where we score 3 and give up 2 and all fucking singles.
Yeah. The another thing that Joe had even brought up too, and again, it defines us. And not to look at all seasons through rose-colored glasses. There've been terrible seasons. Joe mentioned 2007. The one that really jumps out at me as being even a bigger disappointment in 2007 is 1984. Team won 99 games, sort of got upset in the playoffs because they're still sort of young. By no means did you think they were having career years. Sorry if this goes a little bit too far back to all of you, but I mean that one was just stunning. They won the division by I want to say 20 plus games. Weren't even above 500 the next year. Just stunning. Piloted by Tony Russa, God help us. But you traditionally, okay, this is a team. The grinder ball in 2005. It was a nice little tag, and they did dig. They had AJ Persinski, so Lord knows they're going to dig and cheat their way to wins. But of course, they hit 8,000 home runs too. In the 50s, they had an enormous streak from 1951 to 1967, never had a losing season. Traditionally, the White Sox, unlike, say, again, sorry to use it as a frame of reference, the Cubs bottom out frequently. Again, that hasn't happened too much lately, and things are really changing here in the 21st century. But traditionally, always competitive. Going into the season, I mean, this is a lot of the Ken Williams aesthetic of being all in. You always have a shot. Now, granted, maybe you mortgage the farm, to do that, but you're always going in saying, hey, we got a chance this year. We're going for it. There's 4 other teams in the division. Let's go for a division win. None of this rebuilding jazz. Again, that's part of the tradition that brings us perhaps to the team as Sox fans. And it's a fight that you do not see in this team now. The culture seems to be off. Somehow has winning culture, White Sox culture, if that means anything, and in a carpetbagging type of professional sports world, now I know it means less than it ever did. But is there culture taken for granted? Did the White Sox assume bringing in Tony La Russa is going to bring some sort of culture that was going to allow them? Apparently, they did think they're going to take them from the Ricky Renneria White Sox to the Tony La Russa White Sox, and we just didn't know that step was going down instead of up. It was culture taken for granted. Is there laziness in the front office or even on the field that's seeped in that we're seeing this season that somehow got dodged last year?
I think at the end of the day, it just all comes back to Tony La Russa. I know Rick sucks, Kenny sucks, Jerry sucks, but he has just shot this team down. I mean, they're not competitive anymore. The fans hate him. When you constantly go to the park and hear fire Tony chants, and when fire Tony chants break out at other ballparks, you're down bad. I think he broke it. All these players, I mean, they were fun. They were exciting to watch. And then he came in and everybody's just miserable. And I feel like it's some like Stockholm syndrome thing going on, especially with some of these players that'll defend him.
Yes. I
Tim
mean,
will be
Jose,
like, oh no, we're great. I'm like, blink twice, Tim.
yeah,
Come on.
Jose's in that dugout and he looks like he's at a wake or he's just been to a funeral. And yet then the next day, I mean, I think just today or just recently defending Tony again. It's like, yeah, right. Are you there?
Meanwhile, Tony doesn't defend them. He's like, yeah, well, we suck. Or he doesn't defend his players and he's cool with people dinging them after, a 3-0 count. And I'm like, he doesn't care about you. He cares that he's making money and that's it. That he doesn't care. He does not care about this team. Nobody cares about that team. Everybody's lazy. Nobody gives a shit anymore. But Tony, I think, just took what was a promising, talented team on the upswing and just buried it within a year's time.
That's funny. We always say, boy, managers don't, and I don't subscribe to this, but of course, it's very popular to say managers don't really matter. They don't make an impact. And that might not be the case here too, but boy, if there is ever an argument to be made, the managers really do matter in ways that maybe we can't even statistically figure.
There are people that know I am a White Sox fan and will not even ask anything else about the team. Just, how do you feel about Tony? Like, they're like trying to like gauge where I'm at on this, like, do you love him or hate him scale? And I'm like, he's the worst thing they could have done.
Yeah.
I hate him. I am anti-Tony.
Friend, my answer hasn't changed since the last time I gave you that answer. Believe me, it's only gotten worse.
I've answered this 38 times. It will not change another 38 times.
Jordan and Joe, this culture, this issue, again, stemming with Tony. I mean, again, Tony can't, he's not a strong man by no means. He's obviously not 100% of it either, even though he might be really close. There's just something just permeating this team where it's almost like, I don't know if is it laissez-faire? Is it, I'm really unsure. And I guess that's why we're talking about it.
He's a parasite. He is sucking the whatever lifeblood was in this team has been sucked out of it. It almost seems like he was put in this position to be like, I feel this is total conspiracy theory. Jerry hired Tony not only to like whatever, get his firing back, make up to his friend or whatever.
Right.
But he's like, this team is too good. Bring them down a peg. He's like, I think maybe Jerry thought this team was getting too big for their britches. So he's like, you know what? Let's bring in Tony and he'll knock him down a peg. And instead of knocking them down a peg, he's just like knocked them off the ladder entirely. And now they're on the floor writhing in pain, both literally and figuratively because of Tony. And they've been just like nothing. He's like there. He's like absorbing all of the good vibes that were there. And now it's sad, kind of, I guess. I mean, I kind of feel bad for the players because it's like, they're playing bad, but it's like some part of playing good is like being in the good mood to play good. And they're just like, none of them want to win for Tony. They wanted to win, for Ricky and for Robin Ventura, but like no one wants to win for Tony La Russa. They want to win in spite of him. And when you start losing after winning in spite of him, it's like, well, it's not even at this point our call on whether we can win in spite of him. It's winning like because his stupid managerial decisions somehow worked out or whatever. It's like there's nothing, he brings nothing to the table and actively is like a negative force on the team.
That's for sure. Well, that is a conspiracy. I have my own conspiracy theory. I'll share it in a second. It is not nearly as big a whopper as that. If that is anywhere near true, I'm gonna burn the ballpark down. Okay. Jordan's weighed in. Joe, specifically maybe toward culture, and maybe not even just how Tony, because clearly, Tony has thrown it off, arguably poisoned it, ate it all up, sucked it dry like the vampire he is, whatever. But the vibe you're getting, the culture of this team, even maybe 2021 to 2022, or certainly what was being built under Ricky to now where we're at.
Yes. So I don't know how much exactly I should be blaming Tony for a negative culture. I mean, he is the manager, so I would certainly think he's at least responsible, at least to a limited degree. Maybe not 100%, but yeah. Really, when the White Sox were in the rebuild before they were good, 2018, 2019, I would have never imagined like team chemistry or team energy ever being a concern, especially with guys like Tim Anderson who had exhibited the high energy and sort of play style. He had the very epic bat flip in 2019 in what was otherwise a pretty lackluster season. They also had Eloy Jimenez. Even before he was in the majors, I had a strong sense that he'd be a very lively player. And he, in 2018, when they were manipulating his service time, he wrote an article in the Players Tribune. I still remember it. It's still one of my favorite pieces of all time, where he was saying, "I'm ready." And I remember when I came across that, I just gotten home from work that day, and I read that, and I was like, normally I'd be a little bit tired after work, and I'd be ready to sit down, relax and unwind for a bit, but after I read that, I was just ready to run through a brick wall with how energized he was and how enthusiastic he was to get a shot at joining the major league roster when he was very clearly deserving at that point, just crushing minor league pitchers left and right that year. So with like Tim Anderson and Eloy Jimenez, who was very, very close to the top of the prospect rankings that year, never would have imagined like energy or excitement ever being an issue. Like I felt, they were, slightly disappointing. Like if they were, say, only in the 85 to 90 win range and not quite among the best teams in baseball. I've always got the sense going into the height of the rebuild that they would always at least be exciting. And it hasn't happened. And I think there are a lot of people to blame for that. But we've been through it a lot, but absolutely the hiring of Tony La Russa hurts.
Yeah. All right. I'll give you my conspiracy theory quick. It's not new, but we're all scratching our heads. Certainly back 2 years ago when Ricky was first of all fired, but then Tony La Russa was hired. And I think part of the reason it stems from them not having a real manager search since 2004 when Ozzie Guillen was hired. And I think since then, or since Ozzie left, obviously he was there with the White Sox for a number of years, it was a standing offer to Tony. You want to come back, you can come back. And you can't conduct a legitimate managerial interview process with that hanging over your head. No legitimate candidate's going to be like, oh yeah, no problem. If Tony Russa wants to come back, I'll just find another job or I'll be the bench coach. So that's why you get Paul Konerko discussed as a player manager after Ozzie leaves. Robin ends up being hired out of nowhere because he'd be a general if he wasn't a baseball player. Ricky Renneria, obviously a guy who had some success with the Cubs, got dumped and, had no idea when he was hired with the White Sox. I'm sure the same thing was about to happen to him. I think that looming was something that probably they sit down and say, okay, we got to find a guy who's going to be willing to maneuver. And maybe Tony will never come back. And, great. Maybe Ricky Renneria will be a Hall of Fame manager with the White Sox. But if Tony wants to come back, I don't know. I don't know what it would have taken, win a World Series or I don't know, win a division or whatever it was. Certainly making the playoffs wasn't enough, because then it became, wow, geez, Ricky was hunched over like he was constipated during Game 3, even though I had no pitchers. What were we expecting him to look like? Got to fire him. He just can't handle the pressure. Well, I'm guessing he would handle the pressure better in 2022 than the guy we got now. We've talked about this before, but I guess as we wind up, let's revisit this with a wrinkle. I want to say a number of months ago, weeks, months, seems like years, I threw out the option to give you the power to get rid of just one of of the three principal decision makers on the White Sox. The wrinkle is you get rid of one, the other two have to stay. I did the cheat and said, like, well, of course I'm going to get rid of Reinsdorf because then the new owner is going to get rid of Hahn and Russa. No, well, that's a cheat. I admit it. It's a cheat. So the question is, you can get rid of Jerry Reinsdorf as owner, Rick Hahn as general manager, Tony Russa as manager, but at least for, let's say, a year, maybe 2 years, whatever, the other two have to stay. So my question is, as we wind this up, I'll start with Chrystal. Who are you getting rid of, and why? Tony. So Tony still
Tony
goes.
all day. Yeah, because Tony is the cancer to this team. Jerry is on, limited time. And Rick could grow a backbone if those two are gone.
Fair.
So Tony all day.
Okay, Jordan, who's your choice?
Oh God, I think Jerry, because I think Rick will grow a backbone with no Jerry, and if it's only a year or two of Tony, I think Rick can, at least with a new owner who is willing to spend money on some guys, I think he can at least put the talent there to when, let's just say Tony retires after a year or two. I think he can put the talent in place with the money from a new owner that'll, put us in contention whenever Tony's gone, and maybe put us in contention while Tony's here.
7th payroll this year, Jordan. They did have some money this year. Rick just didn't spend it very well, but maybe he'll just wake up. Okay, Joe, 1 of 3. Are you going to make this a split decision, or do you have a repeat answer?
My old answer when we discussed this a while ago was Hahn, but I flipped to Tony on this one. Yeah, like with a new general manager, I feel like they could easily do better than Hahn still, but it would take some time, I feel like, for that change to take effect. Whereas replacing Tony, it's just such an easy thing to do. And the results, I feel like you would at least see something there in the very near future. And there is just so little redeeming about him. Like Hahn, I am of the opinion that general managers have a more impact on a team than managers do, but even still, like, there really is no reason for Russa to be there. Whereas Hahn, while maybe he has hurt the 2022 team a lot because of his offseason.
Oh, yes, he has.
Which have not paid off. No huge surprise there, I guess. But it would take some time for a new general manager to undo that. Whereas replacing Tony would be much easier, and no reason for him to be there.
Yeah.
Can we do fuck, marry, kill now? The top 3.
At some point, that's got to be coming down the line. I'm going to throw in with the Indianapolis field office. I do think it's Tony. I think I cheated before and said Jerry. I think it's Tony, just because, if nothing else, listen, they managed somehow leading up to this year with Ricky. And Ricky, let's face it, Ricky probably isn't the best guy for a job, either. So whoever they end up getting as manager, presumably they would be able to have a free managerial actual process, and they would find somebody good to take over. And then, I guess maybe Rick's the next to go, and Jerry, as was pointed out, however indelicately, he doesn't have much time anyway. So at some point he's going. But again, read our article today from Mark Liptak. He's not going to voluntarily sell. That's not happening. I don't know whose sources are what, but he's not selling until he dies. Too much money is going to cost the Reinsdorf family. And let's face it, they like money. I think we know that they like money. They're not going to give money away unless you blow them out of those. You offer $3 billion for the White Sox. Of course he'll sell. I'm not sure if anybody's going to be offering $3 billion for the White Sox. Listen, we don't have a lot of days off coming up, or I don't know, at least in the next week we don't. We usually have been pacing these lately with days off. So we're going to just squeeze these in as we do. So we'll probably have another one of these. Who knows? It might be another esoteric Side Sox Mothership podcast again, probably late this week, but we'll probably do another one. And who knows? the full attendance of the Indianapolis field office will very likely be around, but if not, hopefully we'll at least get one. Jordan's streak, I think, just continues, especially now that I can pronounce the full name correctly. I'm going to guess she's going to be here probably every podcast. I'm pretty sure she hasn't missed one since joining up. So, we'll have, usual gang of fun folks taking on whatever essay questions I decide to come up with, whether they're fun or not, next podcast. And it'll probably be sooner than you think. We'll probably step these up somehow for some reason. I don't know why. I'm probably already regretting that decision, but we'll do another one soon. Joe and Chrystal, thanks. Straight out of Indianapolis. Jordan, a little further west. Thanks for joining again. Last words, last thoughts on this White Sox team. How's this next week going to go? Kansas City's in town.
Can't wait to get swept. It's going to be fun.
Like in
Go
theory, that
Mets.
should be a good thing, but they have a losing record against Kansas City.
Go Mets. Love the Mets.
Hey, wait, here's a prediction real quick. Okay, we are below 500 against the Royals. 3 more games, and they're coming here. Are the White Sox going to end up at least 500 against the Royals for the 2022 season? Joe, what do you think?
They have to sweep to do that, so definitely not.
Okay. Oh, I didn't even realize that. Okay, well, this is an easy question, I guess, but
I'd go with 1 for 3 for my precise prediction on it.
Okay. Jordan, there are times you're surprisingly positive on these. Are they going to end up with a 500 better?
Not at all.
Not happening?
Not at all.
Okay. All right. And Chrystal, I don't even have
They're
to.
going to
I don't
wind
even
up
have to
like
ask.
9 games back. That might not even be possible.
Coming in.
mathematically.
It's coming and falling fast. Well, thanks for sticking around, everybody. Reading, watching, listening. We're not here unless you are. I mean, let's rethink this over the next month. But anyhow, we'll be back with the podcast sooner than you're ready.